can happen Friday. The art and cultural side of Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene.
Welcome back. This is Grace.
And of course, you are still with us on our topics regarding on yoga. So, our guest today, Dr. Mohan, he has a lot to talk about. But when you were talking you were touching on the topic on science, I'm curious to know because there are people who actually dismiss yoga and other forms of meditation or spirituality approach as part of science or hard sciences. Do you agree with that? Usually they would say that it's pseudoscience.
I think the skepticism is always welcome. In fact, science actually progresses because people do not try to prove anything, and the methodology of science, the so-called Popperian tradition of Karl Popper in the Western scientific tradition, is to attempt to disprove a theory with a hypothesis. We have a null hypothesis. So we don't try to prove anything. What we try to do is set up controls, conditions, try to explain other factors to see if chance plays a role. And if we can rule out chance by probability of chance being a very small agent, let's say 1 out of 1,000, that means, it's less equal to or less than 1.001.
Right.
That means 1% or 1%. That means if chance is only 1% or 1%, that means it's a very low probability that chance cannot exist. And so then we have to rule out chance as a factor in the intervention. In this case, if I do transcendental meditation and I practice yoga, I actually find improvements in my health. I find improvements in my intelligence. And I find this across groups. Experiments have been done in America where they have school students, even school teachers who are under stress, and they measure longitudinally. That is not a flaky one-off effect. In San Francisco, in Chicago, they call them cool schools. They have quiet time, and they find that students are less stressed, grades improve, teachers are less stressed, and you can measure this.
Wow.
You can measure this in terms of EEG, brainwave coherence. We talked about this before. In some cases, in the case of cardiovascular illness, they looked at the heart rate. They looked at the blood chemistry. They look at plaque, which is actually deposited in the system, which can cause heart disease. So there are many variables. And so we always try to set up the experimental condition such that chance is not the factor. We're not trying to prove. So the whole methodology is driven by a healthy skepticism. And more often than not, the research is done by independent people who don't believe in this in independent universities. Mm-hmm. I hope that kind of gives you some insight into your question.
Well, it does, yoga itself, with the scientific all this proof that it has a lot of benefits in every area of life. And also we cannot ignore and also to notice that yoga has a lot of different types. And personally, I used to attend yoga classes before, but then when it comes to choosing yoga, there were various types. Not only the traditional yoga, but it also has the sort of modernized, and it has a lot of infusion with the different elements. So perhaps could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah. First of all, there are several types of yoga, as you may have discovered. The physical yoga is called Hatha yoga, which is where they do what's called asana, the yoga postures, which of course has become very popular, and people associate yoga with these sometimes unwieldy positions, and that is, you have yoga studios in KL and PJ and all over America and all over the world, as a matter of fact. That is Hatha yoga.
Okay.
And then we also have Jnana yoga, which is basically yoga of the intellect. And then the spiritual aspects of yoga, which is bhakti, which is more from the feeling or devotion. Now, there are many other aspects, but nonetheless, all of these aspects lead to yoga, unity. And it's very hard to judge, who is doing what for what, because it's very subjective. A person who is very physically inclined as an athlete may transcend and experience unity very quickly versus someone who's reading a lot, because their minds can be stuck on concepts and they cannot transcend, which means to go beyond being stuck. So yoga's goal is to become unstuck. so that you unfreeze from the boundaries in mind and body and even within the mind. Now, transcendental meditation is part and parcel of yoga. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of transcendental meditation, kind of cleaned up the misunderstanding, and he became very popular in the West. He encouraged a lot of research, and he said that yoga is part and parcel. Transcendental meditation is part and parcel of yoga. He said Patanjali's 8 steps of yoga, where you must do one thing after another. Like, for example, first you must do the yoga asanas, followed by meditation and so on, to achieve unity. He says that has been misunderstood. It's not steps, but limbs.
Right.
And the analogy he gave was, I pull one leg of the table through transcendental meditation, I transcend. The other 3 legs come along because they're all connected. And this really is the underlying insight of yoga, which is basically everything is connected. Mind and body is connected. The intellect and emotions are connected. Heart and brain are connected. We amongst ourselves are connected. Doesn't even matter the distance. I'm here in the United States in the Midwest, and you're in Petaling Jaya, I believe, in Taman Mega.
Correct.
That's right. And how are we communicating with each other? Through Wi-Fi. I'm on a Wi-Fi on my tablet, right?
Yep.
Wi-Fi is use of the electromagnetic spectrum. Everything is connected. So the human physiology, the nervous system, is also receiving and transmitting. So whether we know it or not, we're all connected in a field of consciousness. This we call unified field. Modern physics, some of the modern physicists have glimpsed that everything is connected in nature. So now science is saying, let's test it and see if people doing something in one part of the world through this simple act of yoga called transcendental meditation, can they have an effect on the environment? Excuse me. So they've studied this in America, where he have the Maharishi effect. Yep. So he predicted this several years ago. He said when a small group, 1% doing this, they have an effect on the 99%. It's like the Meissner effect in magnetism. 1% of the electrons will neutralize the incoherence of the rest of the magnetic field. So 1% has a coherent creating effect, or a coherence creating effect on the rest. And so we don't make value judgments of what is right or wrong. We find everything becomes more and more orderly, because when people say you are wrong and I'm right, and everybody starts getting into an argument.
True.
So there must be, and it's also subjective, but nonetheless, there is some indications of what everybody shares, what everybody likes, right? We all prefer peace. We all prefer friendliness. We all prefer liking, enjoying. We all prefer not having disease and suffering kind of thing. So when 1% are doing this technique of transcendental meditation, they found this in 17 studies in the U.S., in the Midwest, matched against control groups by demographic data. They found after 1 year, crime rate fell significantly, and it got published. And this phenomena has been published 30 times. Now, coming back to this more advanced technique of yogic flying, where people practice the superior mind-body coordination, it's a square root of 1%. So for Malaysia, for example, with a population of 30 million, I believe, we need about 500 to 600 people practicing this advanced technique of hopping, but predicted by Patanjali. And we find we can actually measure these effects if we want to. We find there's a significant reduction in crime. Everything stabilizes and normalizes.
Right.
It's been replicated 30 times. So this is the goal of yoga. It's unity, not just in terms of the individual's intimate experience of oneness with his mind and body, her mind and body and self, the deep self, not the ego, but also the individual and the environment.
So it affects the psychology of the person as well.
Yeah, mind is psychology, software and hardware is body. Both are intimately connected.
Meaning the emotion of the person. Let's say a person is, unstable in terms of its emotion. Do you think you can have a more neutral emotion by practicing yoga? Not
neutral in terms of dulling the person. The emotions become enlivened in their full range. That means I enjoy, let's say, the opera more. I enjoy K-pop more. I enjoy classical music more. I enjoy tennis more. the emotions are in full value.
So
they expand.
The awareness towards your surrounding and yourself become much more.
It is actually balanced with the full development of mind. Remember, in psychology, it's not just emotions. It's also thinking. It's cognition. So thinking and feeling. Emotions are feeling. Thinking is the mind. Both feeling and thinking become balanced, not diminish. You understand? And the body doesn't become dull. It becomes lively. Peace is not dull. Peace is vibrant alertness.
Right.
Yes.
That will also lead to have a sort of self-control mechanism as well, isn't it? I mean, developing yourself, restraining yourself, for example, smoking. So by practicing yoga, I mean, psychologically, you can also self-control to extend yourself that perhaps, I can control myself staying away from, smoking or any sorts of the addiction that you have been to.
Yeah. That's a very good question. It's a very important question because a lot of money is being spent in terms of rehabilitation, and now we're looking at health as being more preventative. Now, the interesting word there is control and restraint. Now, I'm going to put on the table something quite different. I'm going to simply say when you practice transcendental meditation, which is yoga, it is not so much restraint, that is controlling oneself. You find the desire for substance abuse comes with stress. So the more stressed you are, the more inclined you are to substance abuse, whether it's a lot of caffeine or sugary stuff or smoking, and in extreme cases, recreational drugs, which can be quite dangerous.
Yep.
So we find that as we restore the mind-body connection through meditation and yoga, the need for the substance abuse begins to fall out very naturally. It is not based on force or restraint.
Right.
So that's, I think, something important to understand, right? So it's naturalness, all right? It's not so much control.
Right.
Of course. And then also, we need to distinguish between, or discern between, it's a very subtle point, discern between inhibition and a moral judgment based on higher intelligence and wisdom. When we meditate, we find as the stresses in our system become dissolved, we become less inhibited. We become more creative. The inhibition that leads to actually expressing ourselves properly, expressing ourselves, what is unique about us, our creativity, our critical thinking, for example. Sometimes we're inhibited by the stresses in our physiology, the blockages in our own body, or in terms of the environment. Now, when we meditate, we release these stresses, so the full potential of the individual is released. At the same time, the wisdom also develops. So it's not based on inhibition or restraint, but it's based on the development of intelligence and higher intelligence, meaning wisdom, where we make wise judgments. We don't want to offend people. We realize that we have a right to speak, but our friends are also important, and they are different. We respect our differences, and we don't offend. So the feeling is also very tender. So meditation, through transcendental meditation, as a lot of research shows that interpersonal relations improve, not just the field effect, tend to appreciate the diversity. There's a saying, everything in nature's garden is beautiful, I appreciate everything innocently. And so as I appreciate, I also show my appreciation. And so that's why, we have the culmination in terms of unity and diversity. Again, unity is not uniformity. If that is nature, or if you believe in a creator, why should there be differences? Why are we all different? No, it's because we are meant to change, to evolve.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. But anyway, we'll take another one short break. When we return, we will have more discussion with Dr. Mohan.